Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I reached to hug my wife, and she pulled away like I was a stranger. Her voice was sharp, dismissive. "Don't touch me. I'm not in the mood to play wife." Those words sliced deeper than any fight we'd ever had. For a second, I froze, my arms still half raised, my mind scrambling for something to say. But then it hit me with the weight of a brick wall. This wasn't about a mood. This was who she had become. I replied without raising my voice. "You won't have to anymore." And I meant it. She looked at me like she didn't understand what I'd just said. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Maybe she thought I'd come crawling back with flowers, excuses, or an apology for daring to want closeness. But I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her why. I just let the silence settle in, heavy, final. That night, we lay in the same bed, but it felt like we were continents apart. She scrolled on her phone, the cold glow lighting her face. I stared at the ceiling, not with panic or heartbreak, but with something sharper, clarity. I wasn't going to fight for scraps anymore. I wasn't going to beg her for affection like a starving man at a locked door. She thought she had power over me. She thought rejecting me was control. She was about to find out what it feels like when a man finally stops trying. The next morning, I didn't kiss her forehead like I always did. I didn't make her coffee. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed my keys and left the house before she even came downstairs. And that's when something inside me clicked. I wasn't retreating. I was erasing her piece by piece, silently, surgically. At work, I started shifting my accounts. Subscriptions canceled. Credit cards adjusted. A portion of my salary rerouted to a private account. She wouldn't notice right away. That was the point. The unraveling had to be quiet, invisible, until it was too late. When I came home that evening, she barely glanced at me. But when she realized dinner wasn't waiting for her, when she saw me eating my own meal in silence without asking if she wanted any, something flickered in her expression. Not guilt, not regret, confusion. For the first time in years, she didn't have me on a leash. Later that night, she tried to test me. She slipped into bed in silk instead of the old cotton she usually wore. She shifted closer, waiting for me to make the first move like always. I didn't. I rolled onto my side, away from her. The silence between us wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. And that's when I saw it. Her mask cracking, just a little. She wasn't in control anymore. The silence had a rhythm now. It wasn't awkward or accidental. It was deliberate. I woke up before her, dressed without a word, and walked out of the house like a ghost. No breakfast together, no small talk. Just absence. And the more I disappeared from her world, the more I felt myself coming back to life in mine. At first, she didn't comment. Maybe she thought it was temporary, one of those moods men slip into. But after a few days, the edges of her control began to fray. She tried small gestures, as if testing the ground. At breakfast, she spoke about her manager, about a canceled meeting, about someone's birthday. I nodded once and went back to my coffee. No smile. No reply. She kept glancing up, waiting for me to bite, but I gave her nothing. That night, I came home later than usual. I'd gone to the gym, then taken the long way back just to stretch the distance further. She was waiting on the couch in a satin robe I hadn't seen in a year, hair curled, wine poured. It was a stage set for seduction, but her timing was off. She looked up and said lightly, almost rehearsed, "You're late." I placed my keys down and replied flatly, "Didn't realize we were on a clock." Her eyes widened, a flicker of something raw flashing across her face. She wasn't used to me pushing back. I cleaned up the mess she had left in the kitchen, wrappers, half-empty containers, without a sigh or complaint. She hovered, restless. "You okay?" she asked finally. I told her, "Better than I've been in a long time." And I meant it. I walked past her, upstairs, shut the door. No fight, no drama, just silence. The following day, she escalated. Lipstick before I got home. Dinner made from scratch, candles lit like we were dating again. I sat down, ate quietly, thanked her, but didn't compliment the food. When she reached across the table, her fingers brushed mine. I pulled my hand back as if I hadn't noticed. She froze, then looked away. The game she had played for years, deny affection, control the rhythm, keep me chasing, was unraveling in her hands. Now she was the one chasing. Now she was the one waiting for validation that never came. Her mask cracked further when I started replying to her texts with surgical precision. "Hope your morning's good," she wrote one afternoon. I answered, "Thanks." Another day, "What do you want for dinner?" My reply, "Doesn't matter." Each word a scalpel, each sentence a mirror showing her exactly what I had felt all those years. By the end of the week, she wasn't as confident. She lingered near me more, her eyes searching my face for answers I refused to give. She had built her identity on control, but I had taken it back without raising my voice. And the irony was sharp. She was starting to feel what I had lived in for years. The quiet ache of being invisible. That night, she reached for me again. This time not with silk, not with a smirk, but with hesitation, like a woman unsure of her place. I didn't move. And in the silence, I knew the shift was complete. I knew the exact moment the panic set in. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a phone call in the middle of the day, something she never did. Her voice was light, too light, a nervous laugh tucked behind every word. "Just wanted to hear your voice," she said. I paused, letting the silence stretch until she filled it. "Anyway, I'll let you go." She hung up before I could answer. That was my confirmation. It wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of losing control. That night, I walked through the door later than usual. She was waiting in the living room, dressed as if we had dinner plans. We didn't. She smiled quickly, her tone sharp with urgency. "There's this new place I've been wanting to try. Figured we could go, maybe just talk." I removed my jacket calmly. "I already ate." Her smile faltered, the mask slipping just long enough for me to see the crack. She covered it with a nod, muttered something about tomorrow, and I walked upstairs without another word. The next 2 days, her attempts grew more obvious. Subtle check-ins through text, little reminders of what she thought I liked. "Hope your morning's going okay. Miss you. What do you want for dinner?" I responded, but never more than 3 words. "All good. Doesn't matter. Thanks." Each message was a blade, cutting away the illusion she had built around herself. But silence wasn't enough anymore. I needed to take back the foundation she stood on, the one I had built. She had always boasted about being independent, about not needing anyone. Yet she had no idea how much of her comfort came from me. Bills, savings, investments, the invisible safety net she never touched but always relied on. It was all mine to manage. And so I started to move quietly, surgically. The first step was simple. A portion of my paycheck rerouted into a private account. Clean, discreet, with no shared access. Then came the cancellations, subscriptions she never paid attention to, but used daily. Streaming services, monthly deliveries, little luxuries she thought appeared like magic. By the time she noticed, the unraveling would already be halfway through. That evening, she sighed from the couch, scrolling on her phone. "Something's wrong with Netflix," she muttered, frowning. I didn't respond. She glanced at me, waiting for the usual fix, the dependable husband who handled the details. I didn't move. Her eyes lingered a little too long, unsettled by the stillness. She wasn't in control anymore. For years, she rationed affection like it was currency, giving it out when it suited her, withholding when she wanted to remind me who held the power. But now the balance had shifted. The silence was mine. The distance was mine. And soon, even the comfort she thought was hers would vanish quietly, leaving her with nothing but the echo of her own choices. That night, as she turned over in bed, restless, I lay awake beside her. Not with anger, not with sadness, with calculation. She thought she had stripped me down to nothing. What she didn't realize was that I had already begun stripping her world away piece by piece. And she wouldn't see it coming until she was already drowning. I didn't expect to find anything that night. But sometimes instinct pulls you in directions you can't explain. She had left her phone charging on the nightstand, the screen lighting up every few minutes with new notifications. I didn't go searching. I just glanced when the glow caught my eye. One of the names that appeared wasn't familiar. Too many late-night texts, too frequent, too intimate in timing. My chest tightened for a second, but I forced myself to breathe. Confrontation wouldn't change the truth. Truth was already written in the frequency of those messages. When she came back into the room, I was sitting calmly on the edge of the bed. She looked at me, then at the phone, and hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already knew. She muttered something about work, about group chats, then turned the device over as if that erased what I had seen. I didn't say a word. My silence pressed harder than any question could. The next morning, I left the house earlier than usual. Not because of rage, but because of clarity. She wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a long time. And if she wanted to spend her nights whispering into someone else's ear, that was fine. But she would do it without the safety net I had always provided. At work, I doubled down on the financial separation. Accounts shifted further. Investments pulled into my name only. Insurance policies adjusted. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. Quietly. Efficiently. Every move erased her grip on me, and she didn't even know it yet. When I came home that evening, she was suddenly cheerful, asking about my day like it mattered. I gave her short answers, polite but detached. She hovered closer than usual, her eyes scanning my face for signs of emotion. There were none. I had become a wall she couldn't climb. Later, I heard her in the kitchen, her voice lowered, the faint murmur of another call. I stood in the hallway, invisible in the dark, listening not to the words but to the tone, the soft laughter, the relaxed pauses, the version of her I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't talking to me, and I realized then that my silence had already begun to haunt her. Because every time she laughed into that phone, some part of her knew I could hear, knew I wasn't reacting, knew I wasn't fighting. That night, I lay beside her, our bodies inches apart, her breathing uneven. She expected anger, maybe even begging. Instead, she got nothing. I stared at the ceiling, calm, collected, my mind already past her. She had lost me the moment she pulled away and told me not to touch her. Everything since then was just the slow unraveling of a life she no longer owned. And as she drifted into uneasy sleep, clutching her phone under the covers like a lifeline, I closed my eyes with the certainty of a man who no longer needed answers. I had already decided how this story ended. The silence was no longer background. It was the center of everything. I could see her starting to crack, even if she tried to hide it behind makeup and carefully chosen words. She used to believe she held the power, that affection was hers to ration, that I'd keep chasing no matter how little she offered. But now the rules had changed, and she was playing a game she didn't understand. It started small. One evening I came home to find the table set, candles lit, her hair done the way she knew I used to like it. She greeted me with a smile that looked more rehearsed than natural, and for the first time in months she had cooked. She placed the plate in front of me, waiting for the reaction she thought would come. I sat down, ate slowly, thanked her, but my words were flat, detached. I didn't tell her it was delicious. I didn't reach across the table. I didn't give her the comfort she was fishing for. Her hand brushed against mine halfway through the meal. It was deliberate, the kind of move designed to reopen a door. I pulled back casually, not with anger, not even with rejection, just absence, as if I hadn't noticed. She froze. Her smile faltered, and she looked down at her plate. That moment told me more than any argument could. The control she had enjoyed for years was gone, and she knew it. The following days were a parade of attempts. Lipstick before I arrived home. Questions she hadn't asked in months. How was your day? Need anything? I answered politely, but my tone was cold, efficient, like a stranger acknowledging a stranger. She tried harder, and the harder she tried, the more obvious her desperation became. Late one night, I heard her in the kitchen, pacing, wiping the counters furiously, muttering under her breath. When I stepped into the room, she startled, then quickly poured 2 glasses of wine. Thought we could share a drink, she said, her voice too bright, too eager. She gestured to the couch like it was an invitation back to normal. I glanced at the glasses, then at her, and quietly said I was heading to bed. I saw her face fall, the smile vanishing before she could mask it. She stood there holding 2 untouched glasses of wine while I walked away. In bed, I lay awake listening to her move around the house, the clinking of glasses being put away, the soft sighs she tried to swallow. She was beginning to taste the same emptiness I had lived with for years, and it unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She had spent so long believing I was safe, predictable, permanently orbiting her. Now I was out of reach, and she didn't know how to pull me back. What she didn't understand was that there was no pulling me back. Every day that passed, I felt lighter, stronger, and her desperation was only proof that I had already left her behind in every way that mattered. The more she tried to fix what she thought was broken, the more distant I became. It wasn't spite. It wasn't revenge. It was survival, and she could feel it slipping through her hands like sand she couldn't hold on to. One evening, I walked in later than usual, having stayed longer at the gym. She was waiting in the living room, arms crossed, her face tight with frustration. "You're never home anymore," she said. Her tone was sharp, not pleading, but accusatory. I hung my jacket slowly, setting my keys on the counter. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, her voice rising. "If you're trying to punish me, it's not working. You're just being childish." I looked at her for a long moment, expression unreadable, then turned and walked into the kitchen. The sound of running water drowned out the silence between us, but the silence was louder than her words. She followed me, pressing harder. "You've changed. You don't even look at me the same. What's going on with you?" Her eyes searched mine like she was trying to spark a reaction. I gave her nothing. Calm. Detached. I rinsed a plate, placed it on the rack, and walked past her without a word. The absence hit her harder than any argument could. She had built a fortress of control on the idea that I needed her validation, that I would always fight for her attention, that my silence meant surrender. But now, my silence meant freedom. That night, she tried a new tactic. She climbed into bed close to me, her hand sliding across my chest, her voice soft, almost whispering. For a second, she thought she could reignite something. But when I didn't respond, when I lay still as if nothing had happened, she pulled back like she had touched fire. The rejection wasn't loud, but it was final. The following morning, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. Her tone was hushed, frustrated. "I don't know what's wrong with him. He's acting like a stranger. It's like he doesn't care anymore." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "He's slipping away, and I can't stop it." I walked past her into the hallway, making sure she saw me. Our eyes met for a brief second. She froze, phone still in hand. Whatever excuse she had been about to make died on her lips. I nodded once, calm and indifferent, then left the house. By the time I returned that night, the energy in the house had shifted. The confidence, the arrogance, the dismissive tone, all of it had drained from her. What remained was something quieter. Fear. And for the first time, she was living in the silence she had forced me to endure for years. Only now it was different. Because she knew it wasn't temporary. She knew it wasn't a phase. She knew it was permanent. And nothing terrified her more than realizing she had no power left to change it. Her fear didn't stay contained within the walls of our house. When silence failed to break me, she reached for reinforcements. I should have seen it coming. But when her sister called me one evening, her tone heavy with concern, I realized the game had expanded. "She says you've been distant," her sister explained cautiously. "She's worried. Are you two okay?" I listened without interruption, letting every word sink in. She had painted me as the one withdrawing, the cold husband turning away for no reason. It was clever. If she could frame me as the problem, maybe the pressure would push me back into the role she wanted me to play. But I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I just said calmly that everything was fine, then ended the call. That silence must have unnerved her more than any denial. Because the next day, her mother reached out too. Same tone, same script, as if the entire family had been briefed. They wanted reassurance. They wanted me to say it was all a misunderstanding. Instead, I gave them the same answer. "We're fine." No elaboration. No cracks to exploit. When I came home that night, she was waiting in the kitchen, her eyes sharp, her tone rehearsed. "Why are you telling my family nothing's wrong? They're worried." I set my keys down and looked at her calmly. The silence stretched, thick enough to choke her. She faltered, her voice rising. "You're making me look crazy." That was the first honest thing she'd said in months. I walked past her without a word, grabbed a glass of water, and let her anger echo unanswered. She wanted to fight. She wanted me to raise my voice, to give her something she could point to as proof that I was the unstable one. Instead, all she got was quiet detachment. The following days, the pressure built. Friends reached out with vague messages. "She says you're going through something. Want to talk?" Coworkers looked at me differently, as if whispers had already spread. I let it all wash over me. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't defend myself. Because defending yourself means you're still playing. And I wasn't playing anymore. She grew more desperate. One night, she tried tears. Sitting at the table, shoulders shaking, she muttered about how I was shutting her out, how she didn't understand what had happened. I watched her carefully, noting the way she kept glancing up to see if her performance was landing. My silence was answer enough. The truth was, she had already lost me. The moment she pushed me away and told me she wasn't in the mood to be a wife, the story ended. Everything now was just the unraveling of a performance, the crumbling of an image she couldn't maintain without my cooperation. And the more she tried to drag others into the war, the more obvious it became to everyone that she was the one unraveling, not me. The first cracks in her performance didn't show at home. They showed in public. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, at a family gathering she insisted we attend. She had painted the picture to everyone that I was cold, distant, and in need of saving. She expected me to play along, to sit quietly while she spun her version of the story. But silence has a way of turning into a mirror. Her cousin asked casually how we were doing. She jumped in before I could answer, her voice too cheerful, too polished. He's just been a little withdrawn, work stress and all that. Her smile wavered as she waited for me to nod in agreement. I didn't. I looked at her cousin calmly and said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy, awkward. Her cousin's eyes shifted to her, then back to me, sensing something off. She tried again, louder this time, as if volume could replace truth. We're fine, really. But the more she insisted, the more obvious it became that she was performing for them, not speaking to me. People noticed. They always do. Later that evening, I overheard her sister whispering in the kitchen. Something's not right. He doesn't look stressed, he looks done. Those words hung in the air like smoke she couldn't clear. When I walked into the room, the conversation died instantly. She turned toward me, eyes pleading, but I walked past them both without breaking stride. By the time we drove home, she was unraveling. Her voice shook as she demanded to know why I hadn't supported her in front of her family. I kept my eyes on the road, calm, steady. She accused me of humiliating her. I didn't respond. But the truth was, she had humiliated herself. All I did was let the silence strip away the mask. The following week, her lies began to collide. Friends who had heard one version of the story started asking questions that didn't line up with what others had been told. She scrambled to adjust, to cover the inconsistencies, but it only made her look more frantic. Meanwhile, I carried on as if nothing had changed. Work, gym, sleep, repeat. No explanations, no corrections. My absence did all the work. One evening, she cornered me in the hallway, her voice sharp, almost desperate. You're making me look insane. I met her eyes, steady, calm, and for the first time she seemed genuinely afraid. Not of me, but of the void she couldn't fill. Because she had built her world on the belief that she controlled the narrative, that she could decide when we were close, when we were distant, when I mattered, and when I didn't. But silence doesn't need defending. Silence doesn't negotiate. Silence exposes. And now, everyone around her was starting to see what I had known all along. She wasn't in control. She was collapsing, and I didn't have to say a single word to make it happen. By the time her lies began to fold in on themselves, I was already 3 steps ahead. Silence had stripped her of control, but now it was time to erase the foundation completely. I moved carefully, methodically, making sure every step was quiet enough that she wouldn't realize what was happening until it was far too late. The first thing I did was secure the essentials. Documents that had sat in drawers for years, marriage certificate, deeds, investment papers, now locked away where she couldn't reach them. Then the locks themselves. She came home one evening and struggled with the front door, fumbling with her key until I opened it from the inside. She laughed nervously, saying something about needing to replace the key. I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind her and set the new set of keys in my pocket. Her confusion was spreading, and I could see it in the way she moved around the house. She lingered more, tested my reactions, tried to catch glimpses of what I was doing. But there was nothing to catch. No raised voices. No dramatic scenes. Just quiet detachment, the sound of her own world shrinking around her. The next cut was financial. The shared account she once treated like a lifeline had been drained, funds rerouted, cards canceled. She found out the hard way, standing in line at a store when her card was declined. That night, she stormed into the house, her voice shaking with outrage, demanding to know what had happened. I watched her from the couch, calm, steady, while she ranted. When she finally paused, waiting for an answer, I said nothing. The silence suffocated her more than any explanation could. By then, the house itself no longer felt like ours. I had begun rearranging the space, clearing out items she had chosen, erasing the little touches she once believed defined us. Her framed photos vanished from shelves. Gifts she had given me disappeared into boxes. Even the living room looked different, colder, stripped down to essentials. She walked through it one night and stopped, her eyes scanning the emptiness. She didn't ask where everything had gone. She knew. The unraveling had reached the point of no return. Friends no longer called as often. Family no longer asked questions. The silence had spread beyond our walls, and she could feel the distance closing in from every direction. She still tried, in small, desperate ways, setting a glass of wine on the table, brushing my shoulder as she passed, but I was already gone. The truth settled over her slowly, painfully. There would be no rebuilding, no reconciliation, no chance to take back the words that started it all. She had pulled away once and told me she wasn't in the mood to be a wife. And I had listened. More than that, I had acted. Now the locks had changed, the accounts were closed, and the silence between us wasn't a pause. It was the ending. And for the first time, she looked at me not with arrogance or anger, but with fear. Because she finally understood, when a man like me leaves, he doesn't come back. The end didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with silence, the same silence she once used as a weapon, only now it was mine. One morning, I woke earlier than usual. The house was quiet, still heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. I walked through each room, noting the spaces where her presence had already faded. Her framed photos were gone, her little decorations boxed away, her laughter just an echo that no longer lived here. I moved with precision, every step deliberate. Papers in my briefcase, keys to the new locks in my pocket, documents signed and sealed. It was the last morning I would ever wake up under the same roof as her. She must have sensed it. When she came downstairs, her face pale, eyes darting, she asked the question without words. She lingered in the doorway, waiting for me to break the silence, to give her something she could fight against. I looked at her one last time, calm, steady, and then I turned away. Her voice cracked behind me. "We can fix this." The words hung in the air, desperate, hollow. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, panic sharpening her tone. "You don't get to just walk away. You don't get to decide it's over." But that was the lie she had lived by all these years, that control belonged to her, that she dictated when affection was given, when distance was enforced, when love mattered. She had believed I would always orbit, waiting for scraps. She was wrong. I walked past her without a word, the sound of my footsteps louder than any reply. She followed me to the door, her voice breaking, trying to rebuild a bridge that no longer existed. But the locks had already been changed, the accounts already emptied, the decision already made. This wasn't a fight. It was an exit. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. I could breathe again, as if the weight of years had lifted in a single morning. My phone buzzed in my pocket, her name lighting the screen. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, and again, each vibration weaker than the last. By the time I reached the car, I had already decided she would never hear from me again. I started the engine and watched the house in the rearview mirror, shrinking smaller with every turn of the wheel. She was inside, alone, surrounded by the silence she once thought she controlled. Now it was her prison. For me, it was freedom. And as I drove away, the final truth settled in my chest with calm certainty. She had wanted to decide when she would play the role of a wife. But she had forgotten one thing. I didn't need a performance. I needed a partner. And now, she would spend the rest of her days realizing the cost of confusing the two. I didn't disappear. I didn't vanish into nothing. I simply stopped being hers. And that silence will echo louder than any goodbye. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.